Hey everyone, as we get closer to Amonkhet and the next chapter in the Gatewatch's fight against evil, I think it's important to catch everyone up on what's happened since Emrakul was imprisoned in the Munan Innistrad. In this two-part series, we're going to tell you everything you need to know about Magic's lore over the last half year. So if you're behind or don't want to read it all or don't have the time to read it all, we've got your back. In this video, we'll be covering everything that happened up to Aether Revolt, and in part 2, we'll catch up to where we are right now, easy peasy. Hope you enjoyed this lore recap video, and if you do, be sure to hit that like button, helps out a lot. We start with Homesick. 3 months prior, Emrakul, the last Eldrazi Titan, became sealed into Innistrad's moon, and Liliana joined the Gatewatch. Since then, the Gatewatch have taken up residence in and around Jace's Sanctum on Ravnica. They're spreading the word throughout the multiverse that they're around and willing to help handle interplanar threats. Sure enough, one other planeswalker has gotten the message. His name is Dovin Baan, and he's a Vedalken worker for the consulate on the plane of Kaladesh. He requests the Gatewatch to act as a security detail of sorts for the upcoming Inventors Fair. The fair intends to be a showcase of the plane's inventors' brilliant creations. However, Baan has received word of a renegade faction planning to sabotage the fair. He wants the Gatewatch to prevent these renegades from messing up the event. Liliana politely explains that the Gatewatch exists primarily to handle threats to entire planes or even multiple planes, and that the renegades seem like too much of a local concern to be on their radar. However, Chandra has quite a different reaction, becoming enraged at the mere mention of the consulate and storming off. This prompts an explanation from Dovin Baan on Chandra's family history on the plane. Meanwhile, Liliana pursues and goads Chandra into planeswalking back to Kaladesh for the first time in a long time because, hey, why wouldn't Liliana want to watch that? Meanwhile, on Kaladesh, invention is afoot. The story, A Time for Innovation, is about an elf inventor named Rashmi. She's working on something potentially revolutionary, a matter teleporter, capable of moving objects instantly across physical space, and it's nearly working. The only problem is the last test blew out a crucial filament, which must be replaced before the device will work again. Rashmi and her Vedalken assistant Matal are having trouble finding a replacement. Most of the local suppliers are short on stock with the Inventors Fair approaching, but the fair is precisely why Rashmi is so desperate to find a replacement. Finally, she runs into a friend of hers, Saheeli Rai. Saheeli is well known for her skill with fine materials, and Rashmi asks her to repair the filament. Saheeli is hesitant to help out once Rashmi explains her breakthrough. This is because Saheeli is a planeswalker, and what Rashmi describes sounds like her teleporter works by passing objects through the blind eternities. Saheeli recognizes the dangerous implications of such a device and doesn't want to take the risk of it falling into the wrong hands. Rashmi is crestfallen with Saheeli's refusal to help, but after some consideration, Saheeli comes around and helps Rashmi complete the teleporter. Nothing bad comes from the blind eternities, right? Oh boy. The next story, Torch of Defiance, brings the focus back around to Chandra. She arrives back on Kaladesh and wants to protect whoever it is the consulate is targeting, simply on principle of them being a consulate target. However, Liliana has followed Chandra back to her home plane, and simply wants to have some fun and get into trouble. And they do, so much so that they wind up pursued by consulate agents and flee onto a train. But it's only when the train stops that things start getting interesting. There are more consulate agents pursuing one particular renegade, the leader of the movement, known as Renegade Prime. Chandra and Liliana disembark and take note of the identities of the renegade and her lead pursuer. The consulate agent leading the charge is Tezzeret, and the renegade is Pia Nalaar, Chandra's mother. We get a flashback in the beginning of the next story titled Renegade Prime. While Chandra had assumed her mother perished in the blaze that resulted in Chandra's arrest by the consulate, Pia actually survived and was also arrested. Baral, the consulate officer responsible for the pursuit, locked her up, but she escaped and rallied what would become the modern renegade movement. However, back in the present, Pia is about to be arrested by the consulate once again. Outnumbered by consulate reinforcements, Chandra and Liliana are forced to retreat. In the process, they run into Nissa, who followed after finding out that Chandra and Liliana had left from Ravnica. Nissa scolds Liliana, who leaves in a huff, and Chandra and Nissa encounter someone else Chandra knows from her youth, Mrs. Bashiri. That brings us to the next story, Born of Aether. On Mrs. Bashiri's suggestion, Chandra and Nissa track down Yahenni, an Aetherborn and an acquaintance of hers, in search of information on where Pia is being held. Yahenni is holding a lavish party, as Aetherborn are known to do. Chandra and Mrs. Bashiri mingle and attempt to seek out leads among the partygoers while Nissa and Yahenni converse. The conversation is interrupted when a consulate official approaches. Someone has locked themselves in the restroom, and whoever they are, they've run afoul of the consulate. All the same, Yahenni is none too pleased with the officer's intrusion, and they ask Nissa to show him the door. With the help of a potted plant, Nissa subdues the officer, and Yahenni asks him for information on where Pia is being held. Yahenni then passes the information on to Chandra and Nissa. Pia is being held in Dun Prison, where Baral is stationed. Bottled Up, the next story, follows Chandra, Nissa, and Mrs. Pashiri as they find their way into the Dun to find Pia. Nissa is able to track the flow of ether to an underground network of tunnels that appear to comprise the prison. They follow the tunnels deeper into the prison until they finally find something. However, what they find isn't Pia, it's Baral. The whole thing was an elaborate trap and a device sets into motion when the three of them approach. 4 walls lock into place and the newly formed room starts filling with poison gas. Baral gloats as the walls resist all of the pyromancy Chandra can muster. While she and Nissa could easily planeswalk away if they wanted to, Mrs. Pashiri isn't so fortunate. They decide not to abandon Mrs. Pashiri and are about to accept their end. But that all changes when Ajani shows up. Release, the next story, tells us how Ajani came to be in the right place at just the right time. It turns out Ajani is in touch with Tamiyo and visited her on Kamigawa sometime prior. Tamiyo informed him about Tezzeret, who Ajani knew was bad news. So Ajani went to Kaladesh in search of Tezzeret. On Kaladesh, Ajani made fast friends with Mrs. Pashiri. That's why he was aware when the consulate officials searched her apartment while she was away. So Ajani went to track her down and found her in the Dun prison, caught in the deadlock trap. He fought his way past the guards, taking care not to kill any of them, and smashed open the trap. Chandra, Nissa, and Mrs. Pashiri were all in pretty bad shape, and nothing Ajani's healing magic couldn't fix. They set out to find where Pia is actually being held. Meanwhile, Liliana has gone back to Ravnica. The next story in this very arena has her informing Jace of Tezzeret's presence on Kaladesh. Jace, Liliana, and Gideon go there to meet the rest of the Gatewatch. Back on Kaladesh, Chandra, Nissa, and Ajani find what the consulate is actually up to. Tezzeret has challenged Pia publicly to a quick smithing duel in the arena to close out the Inventors' Fair by defeating Pia and, by extension, the Renegade movement. Tezzeret also meant for the duel to draw out Chandra. However, he hadn't counted on having to deal with 6 planeswalkers, so when the Gatewatch plus Ajani show up at the arena, he's pretty quickly backed into a corner. He flees and spurs the consulate onto the next stage of their master plan, confiscating all of the inventions from the Inventors' Fair. Saheeli approaches the other planeswalkers to inform them about this, and Ajani suspects Tezzeret is trying to build something based on the confiscated inventions. The final story of the Kaladesh storyline, A Grateful Consulate, shows the aftermath of the arena duel from the consulate's perspective. The inventors whose work was stolen are not happy about it, and the consulate's enforcers are struggling to keep the peace. Tezzeret, meanwhile, has taken a particular interest in Rashmi's invention, just as Saheeli feared. He hands the rest of the inventions off to Dovinban, who, despite his concerns about Tezzeret's methods, thrills at the prospect of analyzing the inventions. And that's going to do it for the first half of our Kaladesh lore catch-up. Be sure to tune in this weekend for the rest of Aether Revolt's storyline that will catch us up to where we are right now. If you've already read it, no spoilers for those who haven't. What do you think of this arc's story? Do you like the direction it's taken? Do you enjoy the characters? How's it all playing out? I'd really like to hear what you have to say on everything, so be sure to leave your thoughts below. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. This video is brought to you in part by TCGplayer.com. We've been talking Kaladesh all day, and wow, is it on the mind? Did you know you can get boxes of Kaladesh right now for $94 each on TCG Player? The set houses some of the most powerful cards in Standard right now, so if you're itching to open some great cards or you want to draft, TCG Player has some of the cheapest prices around. Speaking of cheap prices, Aether Revolt boxes, $90. Now that's cheap. If you want to get your hands on either of these boxes and help the channel in the process, be sure to click on the links on your screen and enjoy your Kaladesh awesomeness. Oh baby.